This is the lending lottery. The draw happens every quarter. You have no idea where you sit in the queue, and you won't know you've lost until you're already refused. Let me put a number on what 6 times income means in practice. If your household earns $150,000 a year, your 6 times threshold is $900,000 in total debt. A mid-range Sydney or Melbourne property with a standard mortgage puts you right in that ceiling. And that's before you've added a car loan, credit card, or other loans. A couple earning $200,000 with a $1.2 million mortgage is already sitting exactly at the limit. Zero headroom. In February and March 2026 alone, a dual income couple lost an estimated $49,000 in borrowing capacity, and that's just from 2 interest rate hikes. If your household is in that income range, run your own numbers before we go further, because the next section is going to show you exactly what happens when both tests hit the same borrower. As of April 2026, Westpac's chief economist is forecasting 3 further rate hikes before the cycle ends. Every hike shrinks your borrowing capacity. This isn't a crash, this is a quiet rationing of who can access credit, and it's operating right now, invisibly on upgraders, refinances, right across the country. If you want to see what this mechanism looks like in motion, look at New Zealand. New Zealand switched on similar DTI limits in July 2024. By early 2026, New Zealand house prices in real terms had fallen by more than 30%. From their 2021 pandemic levels back to levels not seen since 2019. It did not happen overnight. The volume of buyers contracted first, then prices followed with a significant lag. Now let me clarify this. New Zealand is not Australia. We have different rate cycles, different immigration settings, different tax rules on investment property. However, the structural sequence is instructive. When the pool of eligible buyers shrink, the auction rooms empties before the price board moves. Here is what happens when both forces, the valuation drop and the DTI cap, hit the same borrower at the same time. Nick Rabber purchased a boutique apartment in Carnegie, Melbourne approximately 3.5 years ago. He did everything right, first home buyer scheme, low fixed interest rate, never missed a payment. When he sold, he was $70,000 worse off than if he'd rented an equivalent property for the same period. Strata fees had escalated from $1,600 to $4,000 annually. A $6,000 special levy was imposed for roof repairs. The selling price was below his purchase price. Everything went wrong at the same time. Nick's story isn't a one-off. If you bought a unit in inner Melbourne between 2020 and 2022, his experience has become representative of what is happening across that particular market. The RBA published research on this in 2020. They called it the double trigger hypothesis, and APRA formally activated the mechanism they warned about in February this year. 5.5 years passed between the warning and the activation. When APRA pulled that lever, prices were rising. Investor lending had surged to 17.6% in a single quarter. The timing tells its own story. Whether the outcome was anticipated or not, the structure of the rule means refinancing becomes harder precisely when borrowers need it the most. The banks benefit when borrowers can't move and are locked into higher rates. Whether that was the intent is a separate question. Here is the finding. Mortgage default requires 2 triggers operating simultaneously. An income or repayment shock and negative equity. Neither alone is sufficient, but together they produce the highest default rates the research has ever measured. Here is the 9-step sequence that activates both triggers at once. Step 1. Your fixed rate expires. You locked in at 1.95% in 2021. You're now looking at a variable rate of around 6 to 7% for a $700,000 loan. That's over $1,500 more per month. Step 2. You go to refinance. The new lender assesses your DTI. Your household earns $100,000 combined. Your loan is $700,000. That's a DTI of 7, above APRA's threshold of 6. So you land in the quota and you have no idea you're in it. Step 3. The new lender orders a fresh valuation. The property comes in at $630,000 against your loan of $650,000, a negative equity of $20,000. Step 4. Every mainstream lender refuses the refinance. No major bank will take on the loan above $100,000 of the property value. Your options have narrowed materially. Step 5. You apply to a second lender, then a third. Each application is a hard inquiry on your credit file. visible to every lender for 2 years. 3 refusals in and 20 to 40 points are gone. Under Australia's comprehensive credit reporting regime, lenders don't just see the inquiries, they see there are no approvals. That signals distress, which makes the next refusal more likely. Step 6. You're now a mortgage prisoner. You cannot leave your existing lender, and your existing lender knows it. They have no competitive reason to offer you their best rate. They apply their standard rate, not their competitive rate. Step 7. Cash flow collapses. The higher revert rate pushes your monthly payments beyond what you can manage. Step 8. Both triggers are now active simultaneously. Repayment stress, negative equity. This is the exact combination the RBA's research identified as producing the highest foreclosure rates. Step 9. Repossession, the shortfall demand. And here is a detail that surprises most Australians. Unlike the United States, Australian mortgages are full recourse. After repossession and forced sale, if the proceeds don't cover the outstanding loan plus legal costs, you remain personally liable for the difference. The bank doesn't absorb that loss, you do. And depending on the shortfall, it can follow you around for years. That shortfall can also trigger bankruptcy proceedings. Your superannuation is protected, most other assets are not. This pressure isn't new, the mechanism is, the pattern is not, because we have been here before. Every Australian credit squeeze has followed the same pattern. The ones who recognise it early and moved are the ones that didn't get caught. What differentiates 2026 is the regulatory architecture that now exists. Authorities have tools that simply didn't exist in 1990. Australian banks are well capitalised. They have not made the speculative commercial property loans that destroyed the state banks in the 1990s. In March 2026, the Reserve Bank of Australia's Financial Stability Review stated clearly that Australian banks are well positioned to absorb significant loan losses while continuing to support the economy. The same review added quietly that the risk of a more material adverse shock has increased over recent weeks. In regulatory language, that's not background noise, that's a flare, a signal worth watching. So here's what history tells us. Consistently across every episode in this country, all Australian property markets have recovered. Every single one. The question was never whether, it was when. And how had you positioned yourself in the meantime? If this sequence describes your situation, or could describe it in the next 12 months, the most important thing you can do right now is to stay calm. So here's some options you can do if you're in this position, available right now. DTI cap. If you've been caught by the DTI cap, negative equity or both, here is what you can do. If you've been refused on DTI grounds, there's still an option that you may not be aware of. Non-bank lenders are not subject to the APRA's DTI quota. They can lend to you, but an extra 2 to 3 percentage points above the major bank rates. So run the numbers and compare before you proceed, including looking at the entry and exit fees costs. Debt reduction. Reducing total debt before applying. Personal loans, credit cards, buy now, pay later. All these additional loans directly reduces your DTA calculation. Every dollar eliminated improves your position. Some lenders offer a soft inquiry pre-assessment, which does not leave a mark on your credit file. It's worth asking specifically for this before you make any formal application. Timing also matters. APRA's quota resets every quarter. Apply at the start, before the major banks have filled their allocation. And remember, APRA's 20% quota means banks retain internal discretion. An existing relationship with a bank enhances your likelihood of being considered within that quota. Negative equity. If you're trapped in negative equity and cannot refinance, your most effective leverage is a direct negotiation with your existing lender. A lender who repossesses and sells into a falling market loses money. A renegotiated performing loan generates income, and that difference gives you more negotiating power than you think. Additional principal payments, even modest ones, improve your equity position over time, and this moves you further from the danger zone. Banks are legally required to respond to formal hardship requests. ASIC has been active enforcing this against major banks, including ANZ and NAB. If your cash flow is under pressure, a hardship application triggers obligations on their sides, not just yours. If both triggers are active, Engage a financial counsellor before default becomes formal. Call the National Debt Helpline on 1800 007 007. It's free, confidential, and it keeps your options open before default makes the choice for you. A voluntary sale on your own terms, however painful, preserves more control over timing and price than forced repossession. The difference in legal costs and final outcome is material, and it's in your favour if you move first. So those are your options if you're caught in this today. Now here are 3 scenarios that you need to understand. Scenario 1. Further interest rate hikes. Westpac is forecasting 3 more hikes before this cycle ends, taking the cash rate to 4.85%. ANZ and NAB are forecasting 1 more to 4.35%. If the cash rate hits 4.85%, a dual income couple will have lost around $73,000 in borrowing capacity since February alone. Lewis Christopher of SQM Research has modelled conditionally that Sydney and Melbourne could record price declines of between 4 to 9% for the full year in 2026 if the cash rate rises above 4.5%. That requires at least 2 further hikes beyond the current 4.10%. Plausible under the Westpac scenario, but not guaranteed. Scenario 2. Global credit markets tighten. Australian major banks source between 30 to 40% of their funding from international wholesale markets, more than the comparable banks in Canada, the US, Japan or the UK. If global credit conditions deteriorate as they did in 2008, Australian banks face higher funding costs regardless of what the RBA does, and those costs flow directly to you. This is the scenario the RBA flagged in March 2026 in its Financial Stability Review. It is the scenario the regulator is quietly watching. Scenario 3. The mechanism works faster than expected. The quota fills, banks become more conservative, even for borrowers who technically qualify. The pool of qualified buyers at auction shrinks faster than listed property. Auction clearance rates, already at multi-year lows as we saw earlier, continue to fall. Vendor withdrawals build. The gap between listed price and what the market will pay widens, until sellers have to choose between accepting reality or not selling at all. And when I was selling real estate, I used to tell my vendors, it's not what you want to sell your property for, it's what your neighbour sells his for. Your neighbour might have held that property longer than you have. None of these scenarios is a prediction. All 3 are logical extensions of forces already in operation. The purpose of naming them is simple. If any of them materialise, you'll know exactly what you're looking at. The danger in this market is not the position, it's the transition. A borrower with negative equity who can service their loan and never needs to refinance is legally protected. The crisis, if it comes, arrives the moment you're forced to prove your position to a new lender under today's rules. That moment is not inevitable, but understand that it exists, and knowing the sequence of events that leads to it means you can move before the system moves on you. The regulatory architecture protecting you is stronger than it has ever been in Australian history. The banks are better capitalised than in 1990, and every historical episode, 1990, 2017 to 2019, resolved for borrowers who retained one thing, their employment. The key variable was never the property value, it was always employment status. If you know someone whose fixed rate is expiring in the next 6 months, share this video. I'm Barry Maskell, over 30 years in the Australian property industry. You've got this. I'll see you in the next one.